So let's talk about Donald Trump's health. It seems like a subject where you hear two completely different stories, right? On one hand, you have excellent health. On the other, you hear about a serious danger. Today, we're going to unpack, impartially, how both of these narratives can even exist at the same time. We'll look at the official record, the public concerns, and the really complex ethics of it all. And it all really starts with this number, 79. If Donald Trump is inaugurated again in 2025, that's how old he'll be, making him the oldest person to ever take that office. And, that single fact is what fuels this constant firestorm of questions about his physical and mental fitness for the job. And this really gets to the heart of the conflict. On one side, you have the official line from his doctors, excellent health. Simple as that. But on the other, you have commentators and even some medical professionals using language like serious danger. They couldn't be further apart.
So how is that even possible? How can these two completely opposite realities exist at the same time? Well, to figure that out, we need to break it down and look at what's officially on the record versus what's being said out in the open. Okay, let's dive in.
All right, let's start with the official record. This is the information that's been publicly released by the White House's own medical team. This is their side of the story. So in a physical from 2025, the White House put out these numbers. And what you see is a man who's clinically overweight, sure, but has normal blood pressure and optimal cholesterol, which is likely managed with medication. And then there's this, a perfect score, 30 out of 30 on the MoCA test, which is a common screening tool for cognitive problems like dementia. So the official conclusion from his doctor? Excellent health. The report also laid out his medications, which all point to proactively managing his cholesterol and cardiac health. Pretty common concerns for a man his age. This gives us a really clear, on-the-record picture of his prescribed health routine. Trump himself has even commented on all this intense scrutiny. He once said he regretted getting an advanced scan, not because of the results, but because the test itself created speculation. It's a really telling comment that shows you just how sensitive he is to the public perception of his health. Okay, so that's the official record. Now let's flip the coin and look at the other side of the story, the incredibly wide spectrum of concerns that have been raised for years now. And this side of the story, it really kicked off way back in 2015 with a now infamous letter from his personal doctor at the time. It was just filled with these over-the-top superlatives claiming he'd be the healthiest individual ever elected to the presidency. But then the other shoe dropped. The doctor later admitted that Trump himself had dictated the entire letter. And this is a crucial point because it completely changed the context. It showed that the official story hasn't always been, straightforward. And for many people, that created a foundation of distrust right from the start. And this timeline really shows that these concerns are not some new thing. They started with that 2015 letter, they grew in 2017 with the Duty to Warn movement, they were amplified by his own niece's book in 2020, and they continue to be debated online today, even with official reports saying everything is fine. So what are people worried about exactly? Well, the concerns from outside observers tend to fall into a few key buckets. Physically, it's his weight and heart health. Mentally, people point to his father's history with dementia and what they see as memory lapses or disorganized speech. And then psychologically, critics have used some very heavy, clinical-sounding terms like malignant narcissism or sociopathy to describe his behavior, which brings us to a very tricky ethical debate. Yeah, the minute you have mental health professionals weighing in, you land right in the middle of this fascinating and incredibly complex ethical debate. It's really at the heart of this whole issue. And at the core of that debate is something called the Goldwater Rule. Essentially, it's an ethical guideline that forbids psychiatrists from diagnosing public figures they haven't personally examined. It was actually created way back in 1964 after some psychiatrists publicly questioned presidential candidate Barry Goldwater's fitness for office. And this slide really captures the core of the professional dilemma. On one hand, you have those who argue for a duty to warn. They say, look, if a leader poses a potential danger to the public, we have to speak out. It's an exception to the rule. But on the other side, you have critics who say that's a really slippery slope, that diagnosing from a distance is just unethical, and it basically amounts to weaponizing medicine for political arguments. This quote from Dr. James Gilligan highlights a really important nuance in the debate. He argues that the focus shouldn't even be on a specific clinical diagnosis. He says the key question is about dangerousness, which he defines as a behavioral assessment, not strictly a medical one. It's a subtle but really important distinction. So, after looking at the official record, the public concerns, and these deep ethical debates, where does all of this leave the public? Where does it leave us? It leaves us with the central tension. We have an official record that claims excellent health and a perfect cognitive score. At the exact same time, there are persistent, specific concerns from a whole range of observers. We've got an ethical rule that keeps many experts from weighing in, and we have a political figure who frames any question about his health as a purely political attack. Ultimately, this whole thing forces a fundamental question that goes way beyond any single politician. When a leader's fitness for office is so hotly debated, where is the line? Where does the public's right to know end and an individual's right to medical privacy begin? It's a huge question and one with no easy answer at all.